The piercing crack of a gunshot echoed across the dusty main street of Willow Creek, Montana Territory. But Prudence Newell didn't even flinch as she continued her determined stride toward the general store. It was 1876, and at 23 years old, she had already weathered enough storms to know when to take cover and when to stand her ground. Today was decidedly the latter, Miss Newell. "You might want to wait until those drunken fools finish their quarrel," called Mr. Simmons from the safety of his barber shop doorway. Prudence merely lifted her chin higher, her honey-colored hair gleaming in the afternoon sun despite being tightly pinned beneath her modest bonnet. "I have business to attend to, Mr. Simmons. I won't rearrange my day for the foolishness of men." Her response earned her the usual mutters that followed in her wake. "Too proud for her own good," someone whispered. "That Newell girl, too stubborn to bend even when the wind's howling." The labels didn't bother her anymore. 4 years of running her father's ranch since his passing had hardened her to the opinions of others. What did bother her was the sight that greeted her as she approached the general store, a man she'd never seen before, lounging against the hitching post with an ease that suggested he owned not just the post but the entire town. He straightened as she approached, revealing his considerable height. His dark hat shadowed piercing blue eyes, but they caught the light as he tipped the brim in greeting. "Afternoon, madam." Prudence gave him the briefest of nods before attempting to pass by. His voice stopped her. "I'd be obliged if you could direct me to the Newell Ranch." "I hear they might be hiring," she turned slowly. "And who might be asking?" "Noah Everett," he replied with an easy smile that had probably charmed countless women before her. "Just rode in from Wyoming Territory. The Newell Ranch isn't hiring drifters, Mr. Everett." His smile didn't falter. "I'm no drifter, madam. I've worked cattle from Texas to Montana. Got references if you'd care to see them." "I wouldn't." Prudence moved to step around him. "You wouldn't happen to be Miss Newell yourself, would you?" His voice carried a note of amusement that made her stop cold. "And what makes you think that, Mr. Everett?" he chuckled softly. "Just a guess. Something about the way you carry yourself, like you're used to giving orders rather than taking them." "Good day, Mr. Everett." Prudence pushed past him into the store, feeling his eyes on her back long after the door closed behind her. Inside, Mrs. Henderson was arranging bolts of fabric. "Was that Cowboy bothering you, dear? He rode in this morning, been asking about your ranch." "It's nothing I can't handle," Prudence said, retrieving her list from her purse. "I need 20 pounds of coffee, sugar, flour, and whatever mail might have come for us." Mrs. Henderson began gathering the items. "You know, Prudence, a ranch is an awful lot for a young woman to manage alone." My father would have wanted the ranch to stay in the family," Prudence cut in firmly. "And it will. Even with the drought, even with the cattle thieves working their way north." Mrs. Henderson's concern was genuine, but Prudence had heard it all before. "Yes, Mrs. Henderson, even with all that." The bell over the door jingled, and Noah Everett stepped inside, removing his hat. Up close, Prudence could see the fine lines around his eyes, evidence of years squinting against the sun. He wasn't as young as she'd first thought, perhaps 30 or so. "Pardon the interruption, ladies," he said, "but I realized I was being forward out there. Miss Newell, I'd like to properly introduce myself and inquire about work at your ranch." Before Prudence could refuse again, Mrs. Henderson interjected, "You'd be a fool not to at least hear him out, dear. With Tobias and Luke leaving, you're short-handed as it is." Prudence shot the older woman a look of betrayal, but she knew Mrs. Henderson was right. 2 of her most experienced hands had left for the gold fields just last week. "You have experience with drought conditions, Mr. Everett." "Yes, madam. Worked 3 seasons in West Texas during the worst dry spell anyone could remember, kept more cattle alive than most. And rustlers," a shadow crossed his face. "I've dealt with my share, lost good men to them too." Something in his tone gave Prudence pause. There was genuine grief there, not the bravado she'd expected. "The pay is $30 a month, room and board included. Work starts before sunrise and ends when it's done. Sounds fair." And Mr. Everett, Prudence locked eyes with him. I run that ranch, not my foreman, not my hands, me. If that's going to be a problem for you, say so now. Noah held her gaze steadily. No, madam, no problem at all. Then you can load these supplies into my wagon and ride out with me. You'll have a week's trial. If I'm not satisfied, you leave without argument. Understood. As they left the store, Prudence couldn't help noticing how the usual onlookers stared. A new man heading out to the Newell ranch with the woman they called too proud to bend would give them something to gossip about for days. The drive to the ranch was silent for the first mile before Noah spoke. Beautiful country out here, Prudence kept her eyes on the road. It is, though less beautiful when the streams are drying up and the grass is withering. I noticed. What's your water situation? We have 2 reliable springs on the north end of the property. Been rotating the herds between those pastures, but it's not sustainable. Noah nodded thoughtfully. Have you considered digging catchments in the low areas? I helped set up a system in Arizona that, Mr. Everett, Prudence interrupted. I appreciate your eagerness, but perhaps wait until you've seen the ranch before suggesting improvements. To her surprise, he laughed. Fair enough, Miss Newell. I do tend to get ahead of myself. The Newell ranch came into view as they crested a hill, a sprawling main house of timber and stone, a large barn, bunkhouse, and various outbuildings spread across a gentle slope. Below, the valley stretched out, dotted with cattle. Your father built all this? Noah asked, genuine admiration in his voice. With his own hands, most of it. Started with nothing but a claim and a dream when he came west in '53. And now it's yours to protect. It wasn't a question, but an observation. Prudence glanced at him, surprised by his perception. Yes. Now it's mine. As they pulled up to the house, the ranch foreman, Walter, emerged from the barn. His weathered face registered surprise at the sight of Noah. This is Mr. Everett, Prudence announced as she climbed down. He'll be joining us on a trial basis. Walter's bushy eyebrows rose. That right? Well, we sure could use the help. He extended a hand to Noah. Walter Grayson, been working this land since before Miss Prudence here was born. Pleased to meet you, sir. Walter, get Mr. Everett settled in the bunkhouse, then show him the south pasture. We need to move those yearlings before the creek there dries completely. Yes, madam, Walter replied, then turned to Noah. Come on, son, I'll show you where to stow your gear. As the men walked away, Prudence heard Walter's low voice. Word of advice, the boss lady knows her business. She won't bend on what matters, so don't expect her to. Noah's response drifted back to her. I've known plenty of men too stubborn to bend when they should. Maybe she's got good reason to stand firm. Prudence felt a flicker of something unfamiliar appreciation, perhaps before she brushed it aside and headed into the house. The next morning, Prudence was up before dawn as usual. She stood on the porch drinking her coffee, watching the first hints of light touch the eastern horizon. The sound of footsteps made her turn to find Noah already dressed and ready, looking as if he'd been awake for hours. Good morning, Miss Newell. You're up early, Mr. Everett. Always have been. Mind if I join you? She nodded toward the porch railing and he leaned against it, accepting the cup of coffee she offered. Walter tells me you've been running this place single-handed since your father died, he said after a few moments of companionable silence. Walter talks too much. Noah smiled into his cup. He thinks very highly of you, he should. I pay his wages, Prudence replied, but there was no bite to her words. Walter was like family. He also mentioned you've refused 3 offers to buy the ranch in the past year. At this, Prudence stiffened. That's not ranch business, Mr. Everett. That's my business, of course. Noah set his cup down. I've just seen what happens when big outfits start swallowing up smaller ones. It rarely ends well for anyone but the buyers. Is that why you drift from ranch to ranch, avoiding the big outfits? A shadow crossed his face. Something like that. Before she could press further, Walter emerged from the bunkhouse with the other hands. The day's work was beginning. Over the next few days, Prudence observed Noah closely. He worked harder than any man she'd hired, rising first and finishing last. His knowledge of cattle was evident, and even Walter began to defer to his judgment on certain matters. Most surprising to Prudence was how he treated her with respect, but without the undercurrent of resentment or condescension she'd grown accustomed to from hired hands. On the fourth day, she rode out to check on him as he mended fences in the far pasture. She found him shirtless in the midday heat, driving posts with powerful swings of a mallet. Prudence reined in her horse, momentarily transfixed by the play of muscles across his tanned back. When he noticed her, he quickly donned his shirt. "Miss Newell, didn't hear you ride up. How much longer on this section?" she asked, all business despite the warmth she felt in her cheeks. "Another hour should do it." "Then I thought I'd check that spring Walter mentioned, see if we can improve the flow." "I'll join you," she decided impulsively. Noah raised an eyebrow but nodded. "I'd welcome the company." They rode side by side through the golden grass, the heat of the day settling around them. When they reached the spring, it was little more than a trickle feeding into a muddy pool. Noah dismounted and knelt beside it, examining the ground. "There's more water here than meets the eye. It's just finding its way underground instead of on the surface." He began clearing debris from the spring's source. Prudence watched him work, noting the care in his movements. "Where did you learn so much about water management?" "My father was a well digger before he took up ranching," Noah replied, not looking up. "Taught me everything he knew about finding water, keeping it, and making it work for you instead of against you." "And where is he now, your father?" Noah's hands stilled momentarily. "Died in the war, Confederate side. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago." He continued working, widening the channel. "What about your mother? Walter mentioned your father, but not her. She died when I was 14. Pneumonia." Prudence rarely spoke of her mother, but something about Noah's matter-of-fact acceptance of his own loss made it easier. "She taught me to run a household before she passed. My father taught me to run a ranch after." They sound like exceptional people. They were. By the time they finished, the spring was flowing more freely, creating a clear pool that reflected the late afternoon sky. "It'll need to be maintained," Noah said, washing his hands in the fresh water, "but it should provide for a good number of cattle now." "Thank you," Prudence said, the words feeling inadequate for the sudden lightness in her chest as she watched life returning to this small corner of her land. The ride back was different. Something had shifted between them. When Noah spoke, his voice was softer. "If you don't mind my asking, why have you refused to sell? Most people in your position would have taken the money and found an easier life." Prudence considered her answer carefully. "This land isn't just property to me. Every tree my father planted, every fence he built, it's his legacy, and now it's mine." She looked across the rolling hills. "Besides, what would I do? Marry some townsman and pour his coffee for the rest of my days?" Noah chuckled. "I can't picture that." "Neither can I," she admitted with a small smile. "The men in town, they call you too proud to bend," Noah said, studying her face. "Does that bother you?" "No, being underestimated has its advantages." "I don't think anyone who knows you underestimates you, Miss Newell." Their eyes met and Prudence felt a flutter of something dangerous. She looked away first. "Your week's trial ends tomorrow, Mr. Everett. I'll be keeping you on if you're still interested." "I am," he said simply, and they rode the rest of the way in silence. That night, Prudence sat at her father's desk, reviewing the ranch accounts. The drought had hit them hard, and while they weren't destitute, the margins were getting thinner. A knock at the door interrupted her calculations. Noah stood there, hat in hand. "Sorry to disturb you, but Walter wanted me to let you know there are riders approaching from the east, 6 of them." Prudence stood immediately. "Did you recognize them?" "No, but they're coming slow, not trying to hide their approach. That could be good or bad." Prudence retrieved her father's rifle from above the fireplace. "Let's go see what they want." They walked out to where Walter and 2 other hands waited, all armed. In the distance, the riders approached in the gathering dusk. As they drew closer, Prudence recognized the lead rider, James Harrington, owner of the largest ranch in the territory and the man who'd made repeated offers to buy her land. "Miss Newell," he called as he reined in his horse. "Beautiful evening. What brings you out this way, Mr. Harrington?" Prudence kept her voice neutral, though her grip on the rifle tightened, just being neighborly. "Thought I'd introduce you to my new ranch manager, Mr. Blake." He gestured to a hard-faced man beside him. "And to let you know I've purchased the Wilkins place. That puts my land on 3 sides of yours now. Congratulations," Prudence said flatly. "Is that all?" Harrington smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm also renewing my offer for your ranch, $50,000. That's $10,000 more than last time. My answer remains the same." "Miss Newell, be reasonable. This drought isn't ending anytime soon. Cattle prices are falling, and with rustlers working these parts." He shrugged. "It's no country for a woman alone." Noah stepped forward, his voice quiet but carrying, "She's not alone." Harrington looked him over with cold assessment. "And you are?" "Noah Everett, Miss Newell's new foreman." The promotion was news to Prudence, but she didn't contradict him. "Well, Mr. Everett, you should advise your employer that taking my offer would be in her best interest. Things happen in this country, bad things." "Is that a threat, Mr. Harrington?" Prudence asked sharply. "Just an observation, Miss Newell, just an observation." He tipped his hat. "We'll be seeing you." As they rode away, Walter spat on the ground. "Never did like that snake." "He's getting desperate," Prudence observed. "He's overextended himself buying up all that land." Noah watched the retreating riders. "Men like that don't take rejection well. We should double the night watch." Prudence nodded, then turned to him with raised eyebrows. "Foreman." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Seemed appropriate at the time. We'll discuss your presumption in the morning, Mr. Everett." But there was no anger in her voice, only a weariness she couldn't hide. "You should get some rest," Noah said gently. "I'll take first watch." For once, Prudence didn't argue. The next day brought news that changed everything. Walter returned from town with supplies and a grim expression. 3 ranches hit by rustlers in the past week, he reported as they gathered in the ranch yard. 50 head taken from the Parker place, more from the others. "Harrington's work?" Noah asked. Walter shook his head. "Can't prove it, but timing's suspicious. All small outfits that refuse to sell to him." "We'll move the main herd closer to the house," Prudence decided. "And I want armed riders with them day and night. We're short-handed as it is," Walter pointed out, "even with Noah here." "Then hire more men in town," Prudence instructed, "and send word to the marshal about what's happening." As the others dispersed to their tasks, Noah stayed behind. "There's something else we could do, something my father taught me. I'm listening. Set a trap. Make them think we've left a small herd isolated and vulnerable but have men waiting." Prudence considered this. "It's risky. So is doing nothing." She studied his face, the determination in his eyes. "All right, but I'll be part of the ambush." "I'd expect nothing less," Noah replied with a smile that warmed her more than it should have. They spent the day preparing, selecting 20 head to serve as bait, positioning them in a small valley with good sight lines but apparent isolation. As dusk fell, Prudence, Noah, Walter, and 3 other hands concealed themselves in the surrounding brush. Hours passed in tense silence. The moon rose, bathing the landscape in silver light. Prudence found herself positioned next to Noah, close enough to feel the warmth of him in the cooling night air. "Why did you really come here?" she whispered, the question that had nagged at her since his arrival. Noah was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. "I heard about a woman running a ranch alone, standing against the big outfits. It reminded me of someone." "Who?" "My sister. She tried to keep our family ranch after our father died. Harrington's type moved in, pressured her to sell. When she refused, his voice hardened. There was a fire. They called it an accident." Prudence's breath caught. "I'm sorry. I've been drifting since, working ranches, watching the same story play out, but no one ever stands their ground like you have." Before she could respond, Walter's low whistle alerted them riders approaching, moving silently through the shadows. 5 men materialized from the darkness. their faces obscured by bandanas. They began quietly cutting out cattle from the sleeping herd. Prudence raised her rifle, but Noah's hand on her arm stopped her. "Wait until they're all in the open," she nodded, heart pounding. When the rustlers had separated about 10 cattle and begun moving them toward the valley entrance, Noah fired a warning shot into the air. "That's far enough." Chaos erupted. The rustlers scattered, firing wildly as they sought cover. Prudence and the others returned fire, careful to avoid hitting the panicking cattle. One of the rustlers broke from cover, racing for his horse. In the moonlight, Prudence recognized him, Blake, Harrington's new ranch manager. She took aim but hesitated, the thought of taking a life, even a criminal's, giving her pause. The hesitation nearly cost her everything. Another rustler emerged from the shadows directly behind her, gun raised. She turned too late. A shot rang out and the man crumpled. Noah stood a few yards away, his smoking gun still raised. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, rushing to her side. "No, Prudence's words were cut short by the sound of hoofbeats. The remaining rustlers were fleeing into the night. "Blake was with them," she told Noah. "Harrington's man." Noah's jaw tightened. "That's all the proof we need." By morning, they had rounded up the scattered cattle and sent Walter to town with news for the marshal. Blake had escaped, but one rustler was dead and another wounded and captured. His testimony would implicate both Blake and, indirectly, Harrington. Prudence stood on her porch watching the sunrise with a cup of coffee in hand. Noah joined her, his presence now familiar, welcome. "The marshal will investigate Harrington," he said, accepting the cup she offered him. "But men like that have ways of avoiding consequences." "I know, but we've bought time at least." Noah leaned against the porch railing. "I've been thinking, the drought won't last forever, but the next threat will come. That's the nature of this life." "I'm well aware," Prudence replied, a hint of her old defensiveness returning. "What I'm saying is, you don't have to face it alone." She looked at him sharply. "What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Everett? A partnership?" Noah met her gaze steadily. "My experience, your land. We build something that can withstand whatever comes, drought, rustlers, Harrington, all of it." "And what would this partnership entail?" Prudence asked, her heart beating faster despite her outward calm. Noah stepped closer. "Whatever you want it to, I respect you, Prudence. Your strength, your determination, I've never met anyone like you. People say I'm too proud to bend," she said softly. "I don't want you to bend," Noah replied, his voice low. "Except perhaps beside me, not beneath me." The words hung between them, charged with meaning. Prudence studied his face, searching for any sign of deception or manipulation, but found only sincerity and something else, a tenderness that made her breath catch. "I've spent 4 years proving I don't need a man to run this ranch," she said finally. "I'm not offering to run it for you. I'm offering to run it with you." Prudence set down her cup, her fingers trembling slightly. "And if I refuse, then I'll stay on as your foreman if you'll have me, or I'll move on if that's what you prefer." Noah's gaze never wavered. "But I'd rather stay, for the ranch, for you." In that moment, Prudence realized that bending the right kind of bending for the right reasons wasn't weakness at all. It was its own kind of strength. "I think," she said carefully, "that I would like you to stay." Noah's smile was like the sunrise, gradual and warming. He reached for her hand and she let him take it. "On one condition," she added. "Name it. We're equal partners in this, in all of it." Noah nodded, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "I wouldn't have it any other way." When he kissed her, Prudence felt something inside her yield, not breaking, not surrendering, but opening like a flower to the sun. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to lean on someone else, to share her burden rather than bearing it alone. In the weeks that followed, word spread throughout the territory the proud Miss Newell had finally bent, but only beside the cowboy who respected her strength enough to stand as her equal. Together, they faced down Harrington's legal challenges when his involvement with the rustlers came to light. They weathered the end of the drought and began expanding the ranch, implementing Noah's water management techniques to prepare for future dry spells. And when they married that autumn, under the golden leaves of the cottonwoods by the now flowing stream, Prudence wore no corset or constraints, only a simple dress that allowed her to move freely, to stand tall beside her husband. And yes, occasionally to bend, but always of her own choice, always on her own terms. The people of Willow Creek still talked about the transformation, but it wasn't Prudence who had changed fundamentally. It was their understanding of her. What they had mistaken for pride was principle. What they had called stubbornness was resolve. And in Noah Everett, she had found not someone to conquer her spirit, but someone to cherish it. Years later, as they sat on that same porch watching their children play in the yard of a ranch that had not merely survived but thrived, Noah took her hand in his. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Taking a chance on a drifter like me?" Prudence smiled, the lines around her eyes now speaking of laughter rather than worry. "Not for a moment. You know," he said thoughtfully, "they don't call you too proud to bend anymore." "No," she raised an eyebrow. "What do they call me now?" Noah grinned. "Mrs. Everett, the woman who helped build the finest ranch in the territory, and occasionally, behind your back, that formidable woman who finally found a man worthy of her." Prudence laughed, a sound that had become common in their home. Well, they got that part right at least. As the sun set over the land they had fought for and nurtured together, Prudence Newell Everett reflected that she had indeed bent not from weakness but from choice, not in submission but in partnership. And in that bending, she had found not the diminishment she had feared, but a strength greater than any she had known before.